Tom Tugendhat. He's a former Conservative Security Minister and still a Conservative MP and joins us now. Good morning to you, Tom. So afternoon, apologies.
Morning. Well, sorry, good afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, we all had a late night last night, obviously. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Question that was put by the BBC 3 times this morning to David Lammy, asking him if the US military action against Iran was the right thing to do and was it a legal thing to do. His responses were always along the lines of, we weren't involved in the military action, and saying we weren't involved, it's for the Americans to discuss those issues. Can you answer those questions? So was the US action right thing to do? Was it legal?
Well, I think it was both right and legal. This is part of a continuing war, very sadly, that hasn't just started yesterday. It's not a preemptive strike. It's a long-standing conflict between Israel and Iran. Iran, as you know, has been attempting to kill Israelis on numerous occasions using their proxies like Hezbollah, Hamas, and most recently the Houthis. And what the Israelis are doing, sadly, is not only legal, and I wish it weren't, but it also appears to be necessary. Now, the question is, under what law is the United States doing it? Well, I suspect they're doing it because the Israelis asked them to. And in Article 51 of the UN Charter says that you have the right of self-defense and allies have the right to help you in the right of self-defense. So I don't think there's much debate about that.
Well, it's interesting. We had a guest on earlier and a caller earlier. The guest, Thomas Farsi, was saying it was quite clearly illegal, quite clearly unprovoked. That the UN, again, you know, the UN is the ultimate decider, the lawyers are the ultimate decider of these things, and the argument that this is just a big military power basically doing whatever they want. But isn't that kind of how realpolitik works?
Well, I mean, first of all, it may be, but that even that I don't think is the point. I mean, the reality is, how can you possibly argue it is illegal to defend yourself? And only if you argue that Hamas has no connection to Iran, which frankly would be laughable, or Hezbollah has no connection to Iran, which would be, I mean, absurd, could you possibly argue that Iran has not been targeting Israel for many, many years? And actually, if you just simply read, I mean, you don't even need to read, if you have the merest cursory glance at Twitter and the Ayatollah's tweets over the last 5-10 years, I mean, he's constantly threatening to murder Israelis in new ways. I mean, it's literally continuous, and there's no, you know, this isn't news. I mean, I find it very difficult to understand how you cannot think that the Iranians are building a bomb to threaten Israel.
I think there are lots of international debates and national debates where it's perfectly reasonable for people to hold different views. I still think it's perfectly reasonable for people to argue, you know, I'm a massive Brexiteer, but, you know, to be pro, you know, staying in the EU, there are perfectly reasonable arguments. On this issue, I find it, same with Ukraine, I find it very difficult that people don't see this as a clear, black and white, right and wrong issue. Do you think that is how Donald Trump sees it, but he somehow seems to see it in Israel, but he doesn't see it in Ukraine? And how do you think that Keir Starmer and David Lammy see it, and the basis they keep saying we need to de-escalate, we need to go back to the table, to the negotiations, and they won't say that they believe this was the right thing to do?
Look, I mean, Julia, you'll forgive me, I'm not going to try and interpret Donald Trump's mind. I think that's beyond well, certainly beyond me anyway. As for the government, look, they keep seeming to think that their job is to offer legal advice to the world rather than to offer leadership to the British people. And you know, forgive me, I think the job of the British government, I think the job of me and other representatives of the British people is to do what's best for Britain. And to offer the best defence, the best opportunity, the best interest for the UK, you know, for the people of the United Kingdom that I possibly can. Now, there is an argument you can make, and I don't agree with it, but you can make the argument that Israel should have tried not to strike Iranian targets, but instead only strike targets of Iranian proxies. I mean, I don't think it was working. You can make the argument if you like. I think that was failing. You can also make the argument, if you wish, that it would have been better if Israeli forces in some way, either directly or through increasingly large munitions, took out every single site themselves. I mean, that's a respectable position. I don't think it would have made, frankly, much difference. The Iranians are very clear that Israel and the United Kingdom are involved in absolutely everything that any one of the three of us does, so you're going to be blamed anyway. So I'm not sure I buy either of those arguments, but I think it's very difficult to argue, in fact impossible to argue, that the Iranian state hasn't been targeting Israel consistently and, you know, in a most vile way for many years. And actually they've been targeting us too. I mean, Julia, I mean, when I was security minister, the head of MI5 put out a statement, which clearly I had to approve, in which he cited 17 incidents of credible threats to people in the United Kingdom organised by the Iranian regime. You know, the IRGC is a vile organisation who has oppressed the Iranian people hugely over many years. And, you know, when I've spoken to Iranian friends in recent days, in the last day or two, who have friends in Tehran, I'm not going to tell you that they're pleased about the attacks. Of course they're not pleased about the attacks. Nobody's pleased to have their own city attacked. But they're not at all defensive of the attacks against the IRGC. In that sense, one person said that his mother had referred to it as, it's like watching your kidnapper getting beaten up. Yes. You know that there might be an effect on you, but at the same time, you welcome it. And again,
very muted response from other Middle Eastern leaders, I thought, very noticeable. What do you think in terms of what's going on back home? Palestine Action, we're going to face prescription being banned as a terrorist organisation after the damage they did, millions of pounds worth of damage to two planes at RAF Brize Norton after getting, well, I say breaking in, I mean, they've jumped over a fence. I mean, it's not hardly any proper security there. However, they've had a target of violence against organisations and business arms companies and the like, and any company doing business with Israel, and they're going to face this ban, but not soon enough to have them banned from protesting, allowed to protest in London today. The Metropolitan Police Chief, Sir Mark Rowley, has they've managed to limit the protest. May not be in Westminster, not outside Parliament, so you guys, I think you're in Westminster right now, saved from that, and it can only be between 12 and 3, so it's going to be limited. But what do you make of Palestine Action, and when you were a security minister, how big a threat do you think they are? Or is this an attack on, as some on that side of the debate are arguing, attack on basic freedom of speech?
So I don't think it is an attack on basic freedom of speech. If you attack a military site in the United Kingdom, there are various different laws that could cover it. But the very least, you're damaging the ability of the British people to protect themselves. So it's a very, very serious attack. And, you know, you may say, oh, well, it's only red paint. Well, is it? Is there acid in there? Is there something that's corroded the engine? I don't know. We're going to have to check the engine. It's going to cost millions of pounds just to do that. And during that period, there's 2 air-to-air refueling aircraft that we can't put up. And because we can't put them up, we can't refuel. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It has huge knock-on implications for military operations. Now, I do think that the Chief of the Air Staff is going to be, well, in fact, I'm sure he already has ordered a major inquiry into what happened at RAF Brize Norton, and I'm sure there's going to be many red faces. But I think the first thing to say is that there are also groups, and I'm not going to speak specifically about that group, but there are groups of a similar nature who we know are getting funding from overseas in order to conduct actions of this nature in order to undermine the United Kingdom. So, you know, very often you'll see a group that is referred to as, you know, a human rights group or a protest group or whatever it is. And I can tell you from my former job that you know damn well it's not any of those things. It's a proxy for a hostile state.
I know we haven't got you for very long. I want to get into 2 other topics if we could just squeeze those in, because we've got to you a little bit late. But we're told that the Chinese embassy, the super embassy in London, which actually I would be able to virtually see, I think, from outside my window, it was going to be sort of, you know, near Tower Bridge, near, I mean, basically over all the cables going into the city. Some of the US have said this is a crazy thing to allow. It does now look like that actually this Chinese super embassy in the heart of London is going to get approval, and that the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, is going to wave that through, although there's now some talk of a judicial review. But on what planet is this government waving through a clear hostile enemy state from having an embassy at such a prime location in central London, where they could be a danger to our vital communications and security? Why would that be happening?
Look, personally, I think it's daft, and it affects us on 3 different levels. It's a political issue in the sense that the transnational repression, the interference in various community activities that we have here in the UK, freedom of association and so on. We know that the Chinese state has been taking action against, you know, people who speak freely about Hong Kong or Tibet or Xinjiang or whatever. We know that there's a security implication in the sense we know that it could be or will be, there's no could about it, let's be honest, a centre of espionage. And now, third, we know that there's an economic threat, and it's not just the United States. The White House has made a statement, but so have the Dutch and the Swiss parliaments. Now, you know, we want people to use the London markets. We want people to trade on, you know, through the London Clearing House or through the London Stock Exchange. If they're concerned that their transactions are going to be monitored by Beijing, well, guess what? They might find somewhere else.
Yeah, it's that basic, isn't it? Just finally, we're told that at the NATO meeting later this week, there is going to be an agreement from all NATO members, including the UK, to agree to up the budgets for defence to 5% of GDP by 2035. Of course, that will include 3.5% specifically on military. A lot of our money may well be, you know, paying off the Mauritians for the Jagos Islands and indeed even building a third runway at Heathrow. I'm not quite sure why that counts as part of the defence budget, but do you welcome that, or is it too little, too late?
Well, I mean, I welcome it as a direction. I mean, I would urge it to come quicker. I mean, it does rather feel like we're trying to rearm Britain and asking the enemy to wait. I mean, you do know the enemy gets a vote, don't you? You know the enemy sets the pace. You know, it's rather helpful if we're ready. And we've just had
but presumably, wait a minute, but presumably, according to a lot of people, that enemy will wait until they've got agreement from the UN Security Council before they attack us, so we can all relax, because they would all do it legally.
That's right, Julia. Yes, they'll definitely wait for a UN vote before we see increased numbers of sabotage from Russia against sites in the UK, like we've seen people arrested, increased numbers of Iranian attacks, like we've seen increased repression by the Chinese. I mean, come on, this is ridiculous. The reality is we need to increase our spending, sadly. And by the way, it's not just increased spending. We need to rethink our spending as well. We're cutting a hell of a lot of steel in this country when we need to be looking a lot more at technology. Really good to talk to you. Covered a lot of ground there. Tugendhat, Conservative MP, former Security Minister as well. Thank you very much indeed.